talking to Cornelius. Conversation 16. How good was freedom when it came, old man? And how quickly was it compromised? It's strange to start this conversation about your freedom with reference to a courtroom drama. I suppose the one consolation was that you were the plaintiff who lawyered up and took action against a magistrate who falsely imprisoned you and your brother. Your action says a lot about the two of you. Nothing of your spirit was lost through your convict years. Nothing of your pride was coward or broken. The pair of you clearly had a fire for justice in your bellies. And you were smart. You didn't mull over the matter over your cups and decide on some half-baked vendetta that would have landed you both back in convict irons. You found community support and family support, and you took appropriate legal action to make your point. But all of that's to come, and probably not in this conversation. Before we get into the thick of your matter in the Supreme Court, let's step back to the scene before that drama. The setting where you first began to fill your lungs with the bush-scented air of freedom. We have to take flight from Hobart, pass over the southern end of de Grave's Cascade Empire, over the lower reaches of the mountain, and down into a Huon valley that's a world away from the grassy hills and former orchards that we know today. Your valley is better compared to the thickest forested areas of today's southwest wilderness, a place so close to impenetrable that few had ventured there, and the easiest access was by water. And Franklin, which was simply known as the settlement in its earliest days, was perched at the edge of the Huon Valley's challenging wonder. The first view, approaching by river, is not inviting, in general scrubby or barren on the water, except where in a few places the swamp gums approach the riverside. To see its value, the explorer must leave the margin and penetrate by some of the numerous creeks which run into it. Examine the fertile gullies, often a work of extreme difficulty from the superabundance of luxuriant vegetation. It is in those gullies and the hillsides which enclose them that the timber of Van Diemen's Land is seen in its most massive proportions. The lordly swamp gum and stringy bark, forest giants, shoot up from the surrounding scrub hundreds of feet into the air, while at their feet the smaller trees form a dense forest almost impassable. There, the wattle, elsewhere a small tree, little better than a shrub, attains a height of 50 and 60 feet without a branch, bearing its silvery top ornamented with yellow flowers, high above the generality of trees in other situations. Of more lowly growth but varied foliage, the swamp wattle, the cabbage tree, the odoriferous musk, the cotton tree, the magnificent tree fern, and the beautiful green of the pepper plant fill up the lower regions and show the products of a rich, untamed soil, strong in all the luxuriance of nature. Where fires have spread, a rich coat of ashes yielding to the foot encourage the rank growth of succulent weeds, while the constant tap of the splitter's mallet or the harsh grate of the unwearied saw take from the feel of utter loneliness by showing that man is near, though invisible. Geelong Advertiser, 29th of May, 1843. The settlement, originally no more than slab huts and newly cleared patches of land up against the tall timber, was named after Jane Franklin rather than her husband. She'd bought the riverside land from a man named John Price, who married into the Franklin family, became a Hobart magistrate, and then a particularly brutal commandant of Norfolk Island in the late 1840s. Price's cruelty came back to greet him years later in Williamstown, Victoria, when he was hacked to death by a mob of convicts who presumably had long memories. Marcus Clarke's character, Maurice Frere, in For the Term of His Natural Life, was based on John Price. The original version of the story included that brutal Williamstown scene and gave a happy ending to the former convict, who had suffered from Frere's tyranny both in Van Diemen's Land and Victoria. Price's family were not amused. They had Clarke change the ending, so the central character drowned instead of enjoying his happy ending. So, old man, there we are in the setting of Franklin, grafted to the edge of that mighty wilderness. And there's you and your brother, the fresh, emancipated Belfast Donnellys, renting 8 1/4 acres of land from a man named James Thorpe. Your days are filled with land clearing and cultivation, the same rhythmic work you'd known as convicts, but now done for your own benefit. At that time, Franklin had gained a reputation for its fine potatoes that grew in the newly cleared land. Potatoes and wheat were the main crops, though a man named Thomas Judd had planted fruit trees as far back as 1843, and by 1851 William Jeeves was planting his English stocks of stone pippins, Alexanders, Ribston pippins, scarlet pearmains, Blenheim orange and Windsor pippins on his property. A future was growing in pockets, surrounded by an ancient past. Apart from your patch of land, you and James gained further income through bushwork, timber getting and splitting, making shingles, and the other materials people used to make their slab houses. The settlement was a growing place in your early days there. It was the kind of place where men like you had the chance to start a new life among people who had enough in common to make a viable community. And growth brought those further elements that were meant to advance the best interests of the community. A watch house was built, a local magistrate was appointed, and constables were in the local area to keep the peace. They were mainly stationed beyond the entrance to the Huon River at a place called 3 Point Hut. Such was the new order. But we've seen enough of the sordid complexities of Vandemonian society to know that the social reality was something far removed from the intended order. It appears then that there are 3 constables stationed there at 3 Point Hut, under the supervision, or what ought to be the supervision, of a district constable, that the headquarters of the force are at Edward's public house, where playing at skittles and drinking beer seem to be a favourite occupation of the constables, and where Mr. Tomlins, the assistant police magistrate, adjudicates his cases. During the pleasant recreation of skittle playing with its agreeable accompaniments, cases, it would seem, are concocted by these conservators of the peace, calculated to rend asunder the dearest domestic sympathies, and to ruin the innocent for the protection of the guilty. Hobart and Guardian, 5th of March, 1851. In the Huon, skittle playing, perjury and beer drinking appear to be necessary qualifications for, and inseparable from, the condition of a constable. Hobart and Guardian, 30th of April, 1851. It's hard to fathom the rationale behind putting empowered convict constables into a world of newly freed men. And when an egomaniacal magistrate, as thick as 2 short planks, is added to the picture, then there is only likely to be one outcome: disastrous injustice.